Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the CPO Strategy Podcast. As always, I'm your host Sean Parch, and today we're going to be joined by CEO and Co-Founder of Vroozi, Shaz Khan. He's going to be talking about the importance of leveraging new technology that isn't just for technology's sake, procurement's need for a rebrand, and the power of people in the industry. I hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello and welcome to the CPO Strategy Podcast.
Hello, Shaz, and welcome to the CPO Strategy Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here. How are you? You okay?
I'm doing well, Sean. Thank you for having me.
No, it's great to have you here. It's obviously when we welcome, people like yourselves, it's always great to find out a little bit more about your story and sort of how you ended up in procurement to begin with. Was this procurement always an area for you that you were sort of passionate about, or was it something that came to you sort of in later life? Or because a lot of people say that they sort of find themselves in procurement accidentally. They don't, go to school and then think, I want to go into procurement. But what was it like for you when you first sort of began, and set out into the field?
Well, I would certainly classify the analogy of accidental tourist as appropriate for my journey into the procurement function. I studied computer science and economics in university. And my first position out of college was a management consulting position with a large Big Four organization. And at that time, I had no idea what procurement or supply chain optimization meant. But I was speaking with some friends who were in an academy with me, and we decided to take a leap of faith and go into this area of supply chain with a big ERP system, get certified in production planning, materials management, procurement. And I was rapidly just thrown into large multinational companies leading implementations and participating in implementations for procurement solutions and supply chain solutions. Fell in love with it. Loved how systems were being used to optimize outcomes. And we're talking about the late 90s. So just kind of the advent of really internet applications and upstart companies that were really transforming how we interact together on a global level. And one of the things that clearly became apparent was that this was a absolute mission critical function that was not getting the representation that it deserved. And so I began a series of solution consultancies that not only focused on implementing these types of solutions in organizations. And when I talk type of solutions, I'm talking the big ERP packages like Oracle, SAP, and Manugistics at the time, as well as some network technology. But I also saw this convergence of not only systems, but you need human capital to be able to run, manage, and evangelize those solutions to the greater masses. And that's where we found our opportunities in terms of the consulting organizations that we started. Is we mixed both technology and people and process. And then in 2008, I really took my passion for software and looked at this huge effort of consumerizing business-to-business commerce transactions, and ended up starting a digital software solution focused on procure-to-pay, a marketplace, and digital payment capabilities. And we've actually trademarked the term spend tech, with a little bit of flair. Just because all the fintech folks were having all the fun, we said, look, there's this other area that needs to be looked at, which is, all these beautiful business spend management, marketplace technologies that are intersecting with fintech. So that's a little bit about myself and my journey.
Yeah, so it's been 15 years since you did that. I bet time flies, doesn't it? What have you noticed then in those years, and sort of how the procurement space is transforming, because you only need to think about what the last few years have been like in terms of the disruption. If someone woke up from a coma of 3 years, they'd think, what on earth is this? But how would you describe the last sort of maybe the 15 years, but also the industry to where it is today?
I would say that, in the 90s and 2000s, you had this procurement function which was really underrepresented, underfunded, and quite honestly underutilized. And it was a function that was typically only reserved for large Fortune 1000 organizations who had the foresight to invest in these top level management roles. And so we found those roles to be highly one dimensional in the
Mm.
sense that the departments were focused on very binary outcomes, negotiating contracts, getting the best prices with the vendors, managing supply chain timelines and delivery schedules, and doing that all with the help of a major ERP solution. Fast forward to now, and you have this complete nuanced multi-dimensional framework in the office of procurement and the office of CFO, which are converging in many ways and collaborating in many ways. And the way we look at procurement today, we look at procurement as the great value locksmiths, the individuals and teams that can unlock value at a faster pace than any other function within the actual organization. So when you look at procurement, these are individuals that have visibility into supply chain. They have
Hmm.
visibility into risk for product production and services delivery. They have now increasing responsibilities in terms of ESG and CSG uh, requirements. And so it's a complete multidimensional framework that requires a lot more investment. So I'd say one of the constants still within the procurement function is that relative to, let's say, organizations that put a high emphasis on sales, as they should,
Hmm.
we believe procurement departments can absolutely, if funded correctly, be game changers in terms of profit margin.
And that's great to hear, because, for a long time, procurement was seen as this sort of back office activity that, was sort of tucked away somewhere, wasn't it? But now it seems anyway that there's more of a perception that they're coming to the fore. And I spoke to an executive just recently where they said that I've never talked to my CEO more than I have in the last 6 months, just because of all these global challenges. And, there's obviously things, as you mentioned, the ESG, technology, and then obviously, the COVID situation that we had before then. Um, what do you make of these sort of challenges that the procurement professionals have gone through, and sort of where they are, and in terms of at the seat at the table, and they're now sort of forward facing and being right there at the fore, really?
Well, I think that there's two characteristics that we've seen with procurement leadership today, which is resiliency and opportunistic. And resiliency has come by way uh, over the last 3 years with this tsunami of the great resignation, um, inflation, wage increases for procurement talent. And uh, there's an increasing demand for procurement professionals that can speak to requirements to move companies forward in terms of supply chain transparency, cost for goods. Do I have issues with my tier one, tier two suppliers that will impact production for finished goods? And the board is demanding answers that the CPO or director, VP level procurement heads are best equipped to answer. And so it's no shock that these procurement leaders now are having not only a voice, but are actively participating in C-suite activities necessary for businesses to generate their goals.
Oh, well, that's really important to hear. Thank you for that. About technology now, and in terms of digital transformation, because it's such a massive topic, isn't it? You only need to think about AI, big data, all these new and exciting tools, but it's also, about how you leverage them as well, because there's no point just sort of, bringing in anything.
It's very funny when you look at technology hype cycles.
Mm,
And what we always counsel our customers and partners with is be very measured in your approach when you look at market dynamics and hype cycles with technology versus practical solutions. So, in
mm,
other words, we always challenge the companies that we work with to define the problem statement that they're looking to solve.
mm,
There could be existing technology that is underutilized that can be activated to meet the business needs. There could be a whole host of best of breed solutions that can also bolt on elegantly to your existing infrastructure to solve the problem at hand.
Is it about being open minded?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that there's something to be said about being open minded, but there's also something to be said about educating yourself in the market.
Mm-hmm.
And there's such a plethora of application sets now that are leveraging AI, blockchain, robotic process automation, cognitive and predictive analytics. These are all game changing technologies. But you have to synthesize these technologies and sequence them correctly in order to generate the business outcome. Otherwise, what you have is a bunch of tech that gets implemented that doesn't talk to each other and doesn't generate the outcome that you're looking for. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is the challenge for procurement departments is to stay measured, but also hyper focused on educating what are the digital sets of technologies that make sense for my business. Do I need a
Mm-hmm.
supplier risk capability? Do I need to integrate GPT style AI based conversation technologies to
Mm-hmm.
understand, where I can source materials and services at times of crisis? Right? Do I need to be able to build a robust contract management repository so that it integrates very well to my procure to pay capabilities?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the
It's
answer,
about being strategic, isn't it? Because otherwise, it's doomed to fail. If you're just doing it because your rivals are doing it, what's the point?
yeah, a follower makes sense when you're educating yourself on, well, that industry is doing it and they've done it really well, and the solution set makes sense. And we look at 2023 and beyond as a golden age of procurement technology and fintech solutions. And look what's happened over the last 3 months with huge bank failures and leverage that has created this overnight economic crisis. Couple that now with an overhiring spree at some of the biggest companies in the world that has created now this massive, layoff syndrome. But in that layoff syndrome creates opportunity, specifically for procurement departments. You have tremendous data scientists, people that are absolutely educated in advanced tech that can be assets to a procurement department. And so procurement's job is not only to look at the technology, but to also focus on the people that will help
Mm,
enable and maintain those technologies. That's the missing piece, in our opinion, in my opinion, is that
mm,
ironically, you have this complete list of technologies now that you are evaluating, but you need more people, not less,
mhm.
to be able to leverage the power of that tech.
Yeah, people are a massive part of it, aren't they? I was going to say, do you think that it's easier now because there's a younger generation coming through and they're growing up with this technology? What do you feel about that? Do you think that we're seeing leaders maybe be a bit more, I don't know, more agile to it and accepting of new technology, or do you think it's just a industry wide, everyone's happy to adopt this technology and embrace it? Where do you stand on that debate?
I would say rigidity is the death of the modern organization. If you do not have an agile mindset, you will not achieve your goals. And we've seen this time and time again with major companies that have basically said, this is our way. We're selling and distributing products this way, and this will be tested, and we're not going to pivot. Well, a couple years
Mm,
later, new tech comes in, disrupts it, and forces that company to move into a different direction, oftentimes too late. The same
mm,
can be said about procurement departments. Procurement departments have to take an agile approach in ensuring that they focus on what are the goals and problem points that they're looking to solve, what is the talent needed to achieve those goals, and what are the solution sets and sequencing required for them to make those outcomes a reality. See, 3 or 4 years, no, I would say 20 years ago, a procurement transformation project was 18 to 30 months. We lived and breathed that. We put in big box ERP platforms, large consulting organizations, huge representation across major functions within the business units. Now you're looking at speed to market, and you're seeing not MVPs of products being implemented, you're seeing full blown ESG solutions, procure to pay capabilities implemented in 3 months or less. And so implementation of these products is also innovative.
mm,
Speed to market. One of the things that we talked about, I was on a panel with some really incredible procurement professionals. And I said, what is the one most important item for your business and your evaluation of tech? And overwhelmingly, they all said speed.
mm,
Not only
that's it.
speed to market, but also the speed of the transaction, the familiarity of the interface, the consumerization effect of
Mhm.
applications that drive B2B commerce.
But that's I guess that's also the challenge as well, isn't it? It's speed versus what's the point of it. So you know we've just mentioned there, haven't we? You know, if there's no value, if there's no sort of direction for what you're doing, then there's no point in it. So it's speed, but actually, hang on, what are you using it for?
That's right.
Is I guess the thing you need to weigh up.
Yeah, I mean, we look at it very simply, Sean, in this context. It's problem statement, and then we have three pillars under the problem statement: speed, quality, value.
Mm,
You must be unlocking all three simultaneously to generate the outcomes you're looking for.
mm, mm. What do you think the biggest barriers are for people in terms of digital transformation and embracing this technology? Is it that sometimes people are scared and they think, oh, actually, hang on, I want to wait a minute and see what happens essentially? What do you believe?
There's certainly some level of risk aversion
Mm,
within organizations and within procurement departments. These projects and taking on simultaneous projects covering different functions can be risky. But the one barrier I would say is education.
mm,
There's a constant need for what I describe as continuous improvement and sustainable value generation. And
mm,
that needs to be wrapped and shrouded within education. How do you, as procurement leadership, continue to educate yourself on new capabilities in the market? What type of talent there is in the market that can help achieve your goals? And where can you actually unlock more value for a company? And so we just talked to a company that focused on creating a supplier info days at their organization. And the goal of that initiative was to bring suppliers into room that could help innovate in the product development process which can contribute to top line growth for a company. So imagine procurement actually orchestrating that entire event as opposed to the CEO or the chief
Hmm.
operating officer. This is what's happening now, and that's exciting. So you're not only looking at tool selection, you are also looking at ways to invite your suppliers in a more collaborative, dynamic fashion. You're leveraging ecosystems for your benefit. You're getting involved in treasury cash management to optimize cash conversion cycles within organizations. And so it's not just about negotiating contracts and generating cost savings and creating reward structures based on I've saved 2%.
Hmm.
It goes much deeper than just a cost savings model. This is really what we talk about value locksmiths.
Interesting. To go back onto talent now, because I know there's a global shortage of talent in procurement. I mean, it's pretty obvious that people are not entering the industry and into the sort of state that it needs to be at. What do you sort of put this down to? Because procurement has sort of been through the ringer, hasn't it? But why do you think people are a little bit more reluctant to enter the industry? Is it due to the COVID issues because of it, or is it due to training? Or is procurement not being open minded enough and sort of accepting people from different industries that just sort of have a passion and want to learn about procurement? What do you think it is?
I would say that there's two factors here. One is I'll start from kind of higher ed. I think that when you look at higher education, the university system, you do not have programs that lead you into, well, this area within an organization, corporate procurement, can be an incredible entry level area for you when you graduate. I mean, you're looking at data, right? You're
Mm,
leveraging cutting edge tool sets. You're making an impact on the company. Your job is not boring, right? It's
mm,
not pushing paper back and forth or getting on phone calls with suppliers to talk about delivery schedules, right? And so I think that there's an education aspect within higher ed in which there should be programs that evangelize these types of open positions in the market. Okay, that's number one. Number two is corporate procurement is in need of a dire rebrand.
mm,
When you are coming into the workforce and you're saying, I'm working in procurement, try to go explain that to your family or friends, right? And it takes a while. But in
yeah.
reality, we as human beings in our day to day lives are sourcing and procurement professionals every single minute of every day. We are sourcing where our dry cleaning is going to be given. We are negotiating at the farmer's market for carrots, right? And so the act of sourcing and procurement is actually a daily function within our normal business day. So when we look at corporate procurement, do we also ask ourselves this question? Do we need to be rebranding this
Mm,
function? And instead of saying corporate procurement or chief procurement officer, chief digital officer,
yeah.
chief business transformation officer.
Don't overcomplicate it. Essentially, we're sort of almost making it harder for ourselves by putting in these words that maybe people that aren't familiar won't understand and won't realize. When actually, it's pretty simple if you break it down.
That's exactly right. I would say that if you are putting a job description today, data scientist,
Mm,
and you are going on to campuses to recruit at job fairs, do you
mm.
think that you would have a higher attendance with folks with the data scientist job description or an indirect category manager or sourcing specialist?
Because it puts people off, doesn't it? They immediately think, oh, that's not something that I can do. When actually maybe they have got the skills for it, or maybe they have got the passion and everything else that you need for it. They're transferable skills. You can learn about the industry, can't you? You can learn about procurement. It's you need to have those skills, or you need to have that ability and willingness to want to learn, right?
That's exactly right. And I would say that, you know, We need to get more individuals not just falling into procurement by happenstance and make it more measured and
Mm.
predictive, right? In the
Mm-hmm.
sense that you are guiding people through a path. Now, I will say that, look, procurement functions, strategic sourcing professionals, they're some of the most innovative minds that I've met over the last 20 years. When
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about making uh, airplanes and
Mm-hmm.
warships and manufacturing facilities, this requires state of the art thinking, incredibly complex procurement, and experience.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just buy a part for an airplane overnight. You
Mm.
have to be educated through the process in terms of parts procurement. But the key is there opportunity to educate this new workforce on the importance of these capabilities and also the tool sets that you will have to basically drive those capabilities and hyper educate that individual through a path where there is clear succession planning.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you look at Fortune 500, you will see obviously a chief procurement officer function being represented in the majority of organizations there. When you get past the Fortune 500, the CPO role drops off. It drops off a cliff. You work with maybe director level individuals in the purchasing function or sourcing function. You will typically work with a controllership or office of CFO finance function, but you won't have that
Mm-hmm.
procurement representation because it's not a
Mm-hmm.
filled role. That to me is the missing gap and the barriers. How do you educate organizations? How do you educate the workforce that this is a mission critical function that can drive real change and is an absolutely fun, ever changing day to day job?
Missing out on all those people. They just don't realize what they could have. And I think to strip it back to right at the start when you first said, I fell into procurement by accident, as many people do. We need to take that off the table and be like, well, actually, no, I'm going into procurement because of this, this, and this, and get them at university level and get them to realize, actually, no, this could be a viable career option for me, and not just, oh, I'm here now.
Well, I think that's where you can also look at the function of promotion, which
Yeah.
also has to be within the CPO mindset. The CPO cannot just be looking at stitching together digital technologies. They have to
Mm.
be looking at recruiting talent at the university level and beyond
Hmm.
to help them and their organization achieve.
Yeah, no, for sure. And also like retaining them as well, because it's one thing to get them through the door, but if 6 months later they're going to leave and you've not done a very good job of recruiting them properly, how do you ensure that they stay and that 6 months in, a year in, they're not thinking, "Oh, I don't want to do procurement anymore. It's not the place for me." What do you feel like the best sort of initiatives that procurement companies can do to keep people around?
Well, I think number one is that there has to be a path of elevation and succession. So an
Mm-hmm.
individual coming into an entry level procurement role, whether it's as a uh, commodity buyer or a strategic sourcing professional, they have to see a path forward in terms of succession. So, do I have director, VP level, even C-suite aspirations, and can I migrate up the chain? That's number one. I think the other thing is that there should be this, again, taking the idea of multidimensional, there should be this cross training capability where a procurement professional doesn't just look at, okay, well, I need to look at enabling a procure to pay platform and that's my ownership. There should be a cycle program where they can actually learn about finance functions, manufacturing functions, supplier information management functions, collaboration, risk. If you put individuals in opportunities where they can learn in a multidimensional, multifaceted way, chances are you'll keep those employees and you'll make their jobs far more interesting than just staying in a very monolith, one path direction. Right. And so I think those are two opportunities. Now, with the shortage in procurement talent, you have simple economics driving wage increases. And so I think for the next 3 years, we will still see a little bit of instability, if you will, regards to people moving to different positions because of wage increases and the ability to move and command a higher wage.
For sure. Thank you very much for that. And what about the future now? Now, obviously, it's quite a loaded question because nobody really can tell what the future could hold. If I asked you that 5 years ago, what's the next 5 years going to hold? I'm sure it would have been completely different to what's actually unfolded. But in your mind, obviously, it's going to be very digital led. What does the next few years look like in procurement? And that is probably quite a difficult question to ask. But I guess give us your best spiel.
I would say that you are in a golden age of corporate procurement functions where there's an opportunity to rebrand. There's an opportunity to bring together disparate technologies in the quickest way possible. And there's an incredible opportunity to influence business outcomes, not just at a cost savings level, but a top line level. Right, bringing suppliers in for increased collaboration on product development and innovation, looking at opportunities to influence working capital, finding ways to pay suppliers faster and more efficiently, which leads to a happier supply chain and a supply chain that will not be at risk because your payment terms, which might be egregious, they're actually gaining benefit by getting paid faster. Right. And so when I look at the Office of Procurement, this is the opportunity where I believe the Office of Procurement should be actively looking at rebranding, looking at ways to say, these are the things that we are going to do that are going to help generate value. And I'm going to prove it to you every quarter at the board meeting. And where I need funding, I'm going to make my business case right there and then. And so it has to be dynamic, it has to be data driven, and it has to be purposeful with unlocking value as the ultimate goal.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Shaz. That's brilliant. There's a little feature I'm trying to out at the end of my podcasts, which is if you had any advice for yourself or a procurement professional first entering the industry, what would you say to them? Would you change anything about your own procurement journey and offer any tips in particular for anyone first starting out? How would you? What advice would you give?
I would say that stay curious and stay educated. One of the things that often happens when you first come into the workforce is that you're so hyper focused on doing such a great job on that one thing that you're being tasked to do. Right. And managers are really, helpful in that, where they don't want to overload a resource because they don't want to just crush that individual. But if you want to get ahead, you have to be looking at what are the capabilities that can help me and help my organization, and how can I help promote those capabilities? Whether it's new talent, whether it's I found some issues with the database or the data that I've seen that I believe we have opportunities to clean up and maximize and save money on. These are all things that individuals should be looking at. And I think if I look back at my own career, I was just so hyper focused on binary outcomes. I need to implement this software by this date, right? Otherwise, it's a failure, right? Well, I think the real question is, yes, you need to implement the software by this date, but what else? What are the other capabilities that you can be looking at to solve business problems simultaneously or sequenced after a launch of a solution?
Thank you very much, and I appreciate you appearing on the CPO Strategy podcast today. It's been great having you here.
Thank you, Sean. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the CPO Strategy podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, make sure that you subscribe or like our social media pages so that you never miss an episode. I'll see you next time.